Hey everyone, I am here with Josue Morales. He is our producer partner in Guatemala. Everything that you taste through Greenway that's from Guatemala has something to do with Josue, whether he's helped us source it from great producers or he produced it himself. So, Josue, the first question I kind of want to ask you is tell me about La Esperanza, because that's the primary coffee that we purchased from you.
Well, I think that there's another anecdote I always tell people about you in this farm.
Oh no.
And before this farm looked the way it does right now, or produces the way it does right now, I remember, was it like 8 years ago now?
Yeah, eight
8 years,
years.
yeah. And before anything happened here, and you were one of my first visits to La Esperanza. And I remember that these plants were exactly a year old, or getting to a year old,
Yeah,
not
they were
even.
they were babies.
Yes. And I was explaining to you how I was going to design this place so that I could study it. Because the particular thing about La Esperanza is that it's the place where I study and the place where I teach. And I told you that, how I had planted the farm, how I had built it so that, there was a different spacing between the coffee trees, the shade trees, that we were going to have different programs on the soil to learn from it, to understand it. And back then, I don't know if you remember, but nothing even grew on the soil.
Yeah,
It was like sand,
I do
like a
remember that.
sandbox. And anyone that probably heard me say these things 8, 9 years ago might have thought that I was crazy. But David Buer looks at me and he did like this, and he went like, "Okay, I'll buy it." And I was like, "Buy what?" So
There's
I'm
no.
not gonna produce here within the next 3 or 4 years. And you were like, "Yeah, whenever it happens, however much you produce, I'll buy it." And that's been, the reason for this whole friendship, because you've kept your word ever since. So
It's funny you say that because I believed in you back then, and I believed in your vision, and I think that like a lot of what we do at Greenway is pretty similar to that. Like we came from like an office building, coffee bar with two employees, and we decided to roast and grow. And someone believed in us in order to do that, and you wouldn't know it if you first saw the first shop that we had.
yes,
So, in a lot of ways, maybe that's a juxtaposition to how your coffee is served in Houston.
I think so. I think you do it justice. Let's say it
Okay,
like
good.
that.
Yeah. I've competed with Josue's Coffee in the past at the United States Barista competition as well. And just to give you an idea, like this coffee is absolutely spectacular. And when we first started this project 8 years ago, Josue did, like he mentioned, the soil was essentially sand. And if you see where we're at right now and where we're standing, the topsoil, there's just growth. There's a top growth everywhere. Josue, why was that really important for you in Finca La Esperanza?
Well, it wasn't the original idea. The original idea was to do conventional agriculture, because the focus at that point was how to pair high productivity with quality. And eventually, nature kind of corrected our path, if you will. I think that's a nice way of describing it.
Yeah.
But years after starting the farm, I had the first frost that there had been in this region in the last 30 years. So that meant that all of what you see, all of these plants were compromised in their structure, in their root system. They looked like they had been burnt. And at that point, I had a decision to take, because not only was I facing great adversity in my own farm, but we were facing great adversity as a producing origin with the subject of the leaf rust.
Yeah.
So, uh, parallel to that event, I had already been working on developing a solution for especially the small shareholder producer that wouldn't be, it wouldn't burden their capability of continue to invest in coffee. And that's how we made the switch to organic agriculture and to creating products and a system that would enable us to better interact with the soil, the health of the soil, and the metabolism of the plant and how it reacts to the health of that soil. So what you see around us is this like farm that is now bursting with life, and you see it completely lush, and in the worst of the rainy season, after two hurricanes within the last 10 days.
Yeah, now's a good time to talk about this.
Now it's a good time to talk about it because we can walk the farm and you will see that our incidence of leaf rust is at a minimum. I wouldn't even categorize it as having 1% of leaf rust presence in the farm. And this is a farm that, again, we are the only organic certified farm in this region at this point. And we have achieved this based on creating the balance that allowed the biodiversity that gives the plant the necessary tools to thrive and to regenerate itself as adversity comes to it.
And Josue, this is the farm that you operate personally, but it impacts so many different coffee producers all over Guatemala. What would you say the impact of your practice on La Esperanza? How would you say that that's transferred to some of the other farms that you work with?
I would like to say that La Esperanza is the farm that suffers the most, because this is where I take harsh decisions because I have to take it to extremes in terms to in an attempt to imitate the harder conditions that other producers have. So the way that this has transpired is that this has become the training grounds for producers from all over the country. This year has been an exception due to pandemic, but if it weren't a pandemic, we would have producers every single week visiting La Esperanza to receive the workshops that we teach in order for them to learn how to interact with the plant, how to keep it, how to renovate it constantly, and especially we are teaching them how to create the products that are going to bring life back to their soil. So that's something that we can show later in video, but the direct impact of La Esperanza's research and the products that we have developed here is we are covering between the central area of Guatemala and the rainforest region in Coban. Our products are directly being applied to, in the central region we cover about 3 million coffee plants, and in the rainforest we cover about 4 million coffee plants with the fertilization system that we have developed here.
How many coffee plants are here on Esperanza?
La Esperanza has 14,990 of VSRC.
Okay.
And then we have almost 3,000 extra of other varietals.
So with those 18,000 plants, you're impacting 7 million plants.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the scope of the project that you were telling me 8 years ago. And I didn't fathom that it was going to be 7 million plants wide. But I did feel that what you were doing was with someone who had vision and someone who had motive and someone who had the inward drive to make it happen, you know?
Yes, and we talk about the amount of plants now because I don't even know how many people there is anymore, because we are not, I know we have beneficiaries of our program that don't even sell their coffee to us, but since they're neighbors of the producers that we work with, everyone gets products so that we can keep the health of the coffee trees intact.
Yeah. Has your program to mitigate roya or rust, leaf rust, has it helped out outside of the Antigua region?
Oh yeah, Antigua is the smallest demographic that we cover.
Yeah.
I mean, here we have the program implemented at the farms that we directly manage, which is here La Esperanza and our neighboring farms. But the greatest impact has been in the other regions at large where we do a bigger volume. So we're talking about, I mentioned the rainforest region in Coban a lot because that's where we have taken it to a different proportion. But we cover the lake region, we cover in Atitlan, Acatenango, we do the Barberena routes and all those areas. Those are areas that have benefited directly from the product that leaves from here. And last year, we even made we didn't attempt it, we did it. We sent about 1,000 bags of fertilizer all the way to Huehuetenango
Wow.
to aid in a community that was transitioning to organic.
To give you all an idea, Huehuetenango is on the border of Mexico, and I would consider Antigua more central Guatemala.
Yes, it's in miles, it's about 180 miles away from here.
Yeah.
But since the country is so difficult to navigate, it's about the place where that fertilizer went to. It's about a day's drive from here.
I remember one of the big impactful things that you showed me, and I recognize now, is how many different climates there were on our trip from here to Coban.
Uh huh.
So, you mentioned that to me one time. How many climates grow coffee in Guatemala?
There's over 300 different microclimates. I mean, you can drive 5 miles down and it's already a completely different thing. In
Yeah.
any direction from La Esperanza, it's already a different situation.
Yeah, and that's why you have different varieties of Coffea arabica that interact and succeed in different climates, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I have like varietals that I've brought from my travels around the world here in this farm that suffer here because they're not fit for an environment as dry as Antigua. Antigua is one of the regions that receives the least amount of rain
When there's not a hurricane.
when there's not a hurricane. And some of these varietals are made to withstand the harsher conditions around the country, but this is where I breed them. This is where I reproduce their seeds and then send them off later to repopulate other areas that need genetics like that.
I just want to say that I think it's really important. The work you do is really important. And, back home, when I serve your coffee, everyone loves your coffee. But I don't think that, like, it's really hard to convey how much goes into what you do and the vision behind it that stretches and spans so much further than just La Esperanza.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for elaborating on that. I hope that that's one thing that people can take away from our discussion is that whenever you're drinking that awesome coffee that we get from you, it impacts so many people and so many plants outside of this one farm.
Well, and I think the appreciation is mutual because without you and your forgiving palate during some of the difficult years when I was trying to continue with the farm, I think that the reason you kept buying it was the reason we could keep going. So it all comes together.
That touches on something that I'm really passionate about in coffee, and you hit it right on the head, is, and you taught me this more than anyone else, and I stick to it now with other producers that I work with in other coffee producing countries, is there are going to be good times and there are going to be bad times. We are in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
Sticking together and trusting each other and seeing the vision and sharing a mutual vision is, I think, the most part of what we do.
I agree.
Yeah. So, anyway, thank you for elaborating a little bit on our relationship and why we buy La Esperanza and how impactful it is. So, thank you.
Well, and thank you for being here.
Boom.
Well, we gotta go to lunch.
Okay, that was good though.
You should send that to Angela to show her that